Hi, it's Ken Boon. Thanks to all of you that encouraged me to get out there. I have been doing quite a number of interviews over the past week, and it has been really useful in understanding the ground, so I appreciate all the advice, guys. So I thought that today, let's go back to our roots and work out the calculus for Chua Chu Kang GRC. Before I go into that, I wanted to thank Terrence from Yalabat podcast for the shout out a couple of days ago. Turns out, Terrence watches RDP, and I watch Yalabat, and we were both silly and didn't realize that we were classmates from back in secondary school. I guess time has not been too kind for both of us, and we both look kind of different from back then. But yeah, we reconnected and we'll catch up after GE2025. And maybe we'll work on some things together. Okay, back to Chua Chu Kang. I didn't think that this was going to be a hotly contested battleground, but the presence of ESM Goh Chok Tong and PM Lawrence Wong at Chua Chu Kang rally intrigued me to look more into it. And I'm glad I did because there's quite a few things to discuss as I make my prediction. So GE2025 has been a gift that keeps giving when it comes to memes and comedy. Everyone is taking turns, and it was PAP's night to contribute to the pot at the rally on the 26th of April. So this was PM Wong that night.
If you look at the opposition's manifestos, they want the higher income groups to pay even more taxes, more than us, more than what they are doing today. So for example, they propose a wealth tax. What is a wealth tax? That means the richer ones with wealth pay more taxes. In fact, in Singapore, most of the wealth is in property. So Singaporeans already pay property taxes, and those in bigger homes already pay more property tax. But if you want to have a wealth tax on top of a property tax, it simply means those living in private estates, landed property, you better be prepared for more taxes to come if you have more opposition in Parliament. How is it that only Marine Parade reacted?
That awkward silence. The first time I heard this speech, I honestly thought that there was going to be a clever punchline on wealth tax. When it didn't come, I was quite shocked. So this is Chua Chu Kang's demographic data in the Straits Times, no doubt also part of any briefing package to the Prime Minister. Over 85% of residents in Chua Chu Kang stay in HDBs. And what was really jarring to me was that PM Wong was a former National Development Minister, so this reality cannot possibly be lost on him. I honestly don't understand where he was going with this, but it would probably be more appropriate for an audience from Mountbatten or Holland Bukit Timah. That said, everyone makes mistakes. I don't think this incident will steer voters away from the PAP, and part of the reason why is because the alternative parties also had their fair share of gaffels in 2025. So unless a mistake is so egregious, it will not move the needle for die-hard partisan voters and maybe just a little for swing voters. What I was more interested in was PM Wong's as well as ESM Goh's appearances. What's with all the firepower for a seemingly peaceful battleground? So I started to look into the details. So after the new EBRC report was published, Chua Chu Kang went through some changes. The new HDB development in Tengah estates were carved out of the former Hongkar North SMC into Chua Chu Kang, adding around 11,000 voters. A very small number of voters, 193 to be exact, were added from Holland Bukit Timah GRC. Lastly, due to the expected growth in Tengah estates, the EBRC committee wanted to future-proof the region and carved out existing Bukit Gombak and Hillview estates into the new Bukit Gombak SMC, losing around 26,000 voters. This resulted in a total voter base in Chua Chu Kang of around 93,000 for GE2025. So if we used GE2020 win rate as a proxy for this year, these are how the numbers look like for the incumbent PAP. When the PAP B team competed against them, they managed to get around 58% of the votes. The Tengah and Holland Bukit Timah editions were at around 61 and 66% mandates respectively. So this puts the starting point for the PAP in GE2025 at around 59%. In reality, these numbers for the almost 12,000 new voters in Chua Chu Kang could be quite conservative. So these are new HDB estates that could tend towards the incumbent. But you could also make the argument that these younger voters will be less loyal than the residents from the former Hongkar North SMC, which consists of much older voters and are more likely to be loyal to the PAP. I didn't want to guess which argument was stronger, so here's the other way I decided to think about it. All else equal, the GE2020 win rates continue to apply to the new voters coming into Chua Chu Kang. Even if the existing 81,000 over voters in Chua Chu Kang came at a coin toss at 50-50, the PAP would still win with over 51% of the votes. That is an incredible margin of error for the incumbent. And remember this number because it will become relevant towards the end of this analysis. In terms of track record, we already talked about the PAP securing over 58% of the votes in GE2020 against the PSP. In GE2015, they won almost 77% of the votes against the People's Power Party. Lastly, in GE2011, just over 61% against the National Solidarity Party. This track record tells me that the PAP team in Chua Chu Kang has not truly been battle tested, and the margin drop in GE2020 was quite telling. The moment a more credible alternative came, the margins fell below 60%. And this came as a surprise to me because DPM Gan Kim Yong has been an anchor minister throughout and is arguably one of the most steady cabinet members with no obvious controversies. Fast forward to GE2025, DPM Gan is no longer part of the PAP team in Chua Chu Kang. He is now in Punggol GRC. And there are anecdotal evidence that this was a last-minute decision. I mean, brochures with his face still been sent to Chua Chu Kang residents after nomination day, his late arrival to the nomination centre, the fact that the PAP candidate website had to be updated. Strategically speaking, I think voters can appreciate that this seemingly last-minute change was a way for the incumbent to shore up Punggol GRC, where there's expected to be a fierce showdown with the Workers' Party. However, if you're a Chua Chu Kang voter, what's your first instinct? Probably angry, maybe a little disappointed. And if you are an ardent PAP supporter, maybe grudgingly you accepted that you had to take a hit for the greater good. And that were my initial hypotheses too. But I have a hot take. I do not think that the anger and resentment is quite as strong as people think. And let's talk through why. So Chua Chu Kang is one of Singapore's quintessentially mature heartlands. Amazingly, it has no hawker centres and maybe one good mall. Transportation is abysmal, and on top of that, newer estates in other parts of Singapore are getting a lot of love from the government. I mean, look at Sengkang. No hawker centres in 2020, now they have 4 brand new ones in the last 5 years. Now my hot take is this. Chua Chu Kang residents have accepted this horrible reality over the years. Even with the opportunity to vote in 2011 and 2015, they still didn't go with the alternatives. This tells me that voters, despite everything, preferred the familiar over the unknown. Another thing that voters also told me in 2020 with their voting pattern is that if a credible opposition comes in, they can change their minds and get out of this beaten wife syndrome phenomena, so to speak. I even go as far as to speculate that PAP is aware of this, and that credence comes from their lineup choices in GE2025. All the incumbents are gone except Mr. Zhu, who is a backbencher in the PAP, and I'm pretty sure that the PAP has not pivoted to an anchor lawyer strategy to carry their GRCs. And to fill the vacancies, they have gone with 2 new PAP candidates. First, 46-year-old Mr. Jeffrey Sell, who was the highest-ranking civil servant to step down for politics in 2025. He was formerly the second perm sec at the Ministry of Manpower and MTI. Prior to that, he was Managing Director of Enterprise Singapore and PPS to then PM Lee Hsien Loong. Basically, he is the typical high-flying civil servant type. Next, we have 38-year-old Miss Chu Pei Ling. She is a neuroscientist who is also an assistant professor at the Singapore Institute of Technology, and she is very active at the grassroots level in Marine Parade. Last and more interestingly, PAP has brought in Manpower Minister Mr. Tan See Leng, who made a last-minute switch from Marine Parade-Braddell Heights to Chua Chu Kang. So most of our viewers follow politics closely, and you know the happenings inside out. And Minister Tan's most famous call to fame or infamy, depending on who you ask, came in that Cantonese incident during Parliament with PSP's Mr. Leong Man Wai.
It goes like this. 講你又唔聽，聽你又唔明，明你又唔做，做你又做錯，錯你又唔認，認你又唔改，改你又唔服，咁你叫我點啊？ I've done my best repeatedly to explain to him over and over again.
But I think for the average voter in Singapore and in Chua Chu Kang, most probably just know Mr. Tan as a minister, and likely think of him as just another minister at that. Now, put yourself in the shoes of a Chua Chu Kang voter. The last minister didn't really do much for me. I tolerated for more than a decade now. In 2025, I have another chance at the roulette with this other minister. I mean, things cannot get worse, right? Plus, I can make this vote for PAP and stick with a somewhat familiar choice rather than the unknown. In a similar vein, I apply this logic to the new faces in the PAP team. In Singapore, politics tend to be built from bottoms up at the grassroots level. Neither Mr. Xiao or Ms. Chu have any kind of presence in Chua Chu Kang prior to GE2025, and this would normally be a disadvantage. But Chua Chu Kang is unique. It's like that kid that only had plain mee pok ta with salt and vinegar all their lives, and they're craving for some simple bak chor mee. New minister coming in, new faces coming in, that means new perspectives, new ideas. Maybe that's not such a bad thing and things can change. I don't know. I mean, if you're a Chua Chu Kang resident, let me know what you think. That said, this reality with the PAP also leaves a vulnerability for the incumbent. Residents looking for hope does not mean that they have to go with PAP. There's no monopoly on good ideas, so an alternative party with credible candidates, credible ideas, has just as much of a chance at winning over voters. Now, we know that Progress Singapore Party is contesting in Chua Chu Kang. So while it's not the big three of the party, this team looks credible. Let's take a look at who they have. First, we have 55-year-old Mr. Lawrence Peck, who is new to politics. He is the former Secretary General of the Singapore Manufacturing Federation and is currently an investor and mergers and acquisition advisor. The other three members are all PSP veterans who have participated in elections before. There's 48-year-old Miss Wendy Loh, former partner at big law firm Raja & Tan, and currently head of intellectual property practice at Eldon Law. She is active in NGOs and does pro bono work for domestic workers. Next is 71-year-old Mr. Abbas, who is a safety consultant and second vice chair of the PSP. Last but not least, 60-year-old Mr. Nala Karupan, who is a stockbroker and president of Singapore's Remisers Society. He is also the treasurer of the PSP. At this juncture, I want to comment more strategically about Singapore's opposition and the PSP. I believe that a healthy democracy is one where there's a good mix of voices. To get there, we will need good people on all sides of the aisle. In GE2025, it's very heartening to see that it is not only the Workers' Party that have credibility and can bring candidates of high caliber. Some may say that this PSP team is their B team, which in relative terms is not wrong. But if the B team can be as good or arguably better than some PAP backbencher, that is progress for Singapore's opposition. Next, on a strategic level for the PSP, today the PSP is really all about the three personalities of Dr. Tan Cheng Bock, Mr. Leong Man Wai, and Ms. Hazel Phua. Preparing the next generation will be critical for the long-term viability of the party. So even if these candidates do not win this year, it will seed their foundations for the next elections to come, hoisting their political party for long-term success. So overall, this is a net positive for PSP's people development. And this will be especially important for GE2025 because PSP has placed all their bets on West Coast Jurong West GRC, and the loss there could potentially destroy the party. But seeing some of the risks being hedged by exposing their next generation in this election, things may well turn out okay even with a loss. Alright, back to the lineup. One of the things that this team has going for it are that their average age is about 59 years old. That is similar to the older demographic in Chua Chu Kang. And by comparison, the PAP team is averaging around 47 years old. Small factor though, I think. Now, let's go back to our two considerations again. To win, PSP needs credible candidates. Check. To win, they also need their candidates to be able to articulate their ideas. So I watched their rallies and interviews. In absolute terms, I felt that they achieved that. In fact, I also watched the PAP candidates, and I also felt they were pretty credible and articulated their platforms too. That's when I started thinking, if PSP and PAP are both credible, that's probably not enough for the former to win. Remember the 51% that I talked about earlier? Even if remaining voters are evenly split for the PAP and PSP, it will still be insufficient for PSP victory. It will take something extraordinary to break that tie, a moment of differentiation of sorts. And I was reminded of a litmus test that we can apply. Have a listen to this from a Workers' Party rally.
My name is Jackson. and I am proudly from the Workers' Party. This belief is what first drew me to the Workers' Party, to stop being a keyboard warrior and become the change I want to see. Halo, apa ini? Nama action, bukan action. I reject the PAP's message of fear. I do not believe in the politics of fear. I believe in the politics of hope.
So that was Mr. Jackson Au from the Workers' Party. How did he make you feel? A bit inspired? You could almost feel that fire from his belly, right? He comes across as a credible candidate, just like the good folks from this PSP team. The difference is, he exudes an X factor. Initially, I really didn't think much of Mr. Jackson Au in that star-started WP Pongo team, with Mr. Harpreet Singh and Miss Alexis Dang. But after that speech, I changed my mind. In fact, as a neutral bystander, that motivated me to seek him out to interview him, and I have the interview in the description if you're interested. But the point here is this: his ability to communicate and galvanize was a moment of differentiation. It opened up hearts and minds to want to hear more from him, which could make all the difference in a hot battleground like Pongo GRC, where he is contesting. In contrast, I did not see this X factor in this PSP team. By the way, this is not a knock on their capabilities or credibility. They are credible, and they feel like they will be steady hands if they became MPs. This sounds good until you hear that my impression is that PAP candidates look like they will be steady hands too. And I come back to the 51% number. If the candidates are equally matched and all existing Chua Chu Kang voters voted 50-50 for each side, it's still a loss for the PSP. The PSP team has not distinguished themselves from the PAP team, and PAP has several tailwinds potentially going for them. New HDB developments in Tengah and Holland Bukit Timah, voters in Chua Chu Kang historically preferring familiarity, a refreshed PAP team that gives hope for change without having to go for the unknown. The odds are significantly against the PSP, and it's for these reasons that I think that Chua Chu Kang will likely stay with the incumbent in GE2025. Alright, that's my prediction for Chua Chu Kang GRC. I'm sure many of you have your views and thoughts about this, so do let us know what you think in the comment section. And don't forget to drop a like and subscribe if this is content that you enjoy. And until next time, this is our Red Dot Perspective.